Cesar, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. I know you and I have known each other for a couple years now, and you've been helping us just providing feedback from your experience in sales enablement and just operating revenue machines. So very much appreciated. Thank you so much. Why don't you take a quick second to kind of just give us a quick background and how did you get into this whole, sales enablement, revenue machine building world?
Well, that's a loaded question, but yeah, thank you for having me. So, I've been in the sales and marketing space for 35 years or so, and started off as an individual contributor, sales manager, national sales and marketing manager, then regional sales director and trainer. So I've been doing that for a bit, and then 12 years ago, went off and started doing more sales enablement work specifically. And of course, that nomenclature didn't even come about until 2013, 2014. And so that's when I started working in the tech field. It's really about more like in 9 years ago is when I started working for a tech company, a storage company that kind of powered 65% of the world's supercomputers. And I started getting up to speed with the whole tech space and enabling teams. And so sales enablement, just to be clear, I define, how do we define sales enablement? People, I think, are defining that differently. For me, I try to keep it simple. I look at it as the three T's, right? And so that's what I'm doing in sales enablement. This is basically what are the tools people are using, what's the training that we're providing to them, both on the tools, on the products, and on selling skills. And then the third T is for transformational coaching. So my work really involves helping sales teams to do that, to address some of those go-to-market facts, GTM facts I have here, and challenges that I have in terms of percentages, and helping them to close gaps.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I know we've talked a lot about your, you know, experience in this space, and again, you've been really helpful with a lot of things, but particularly like deploying these strategies. And speaking of strategies, if you think about key kind of items or techniques to focus on if you're a B2B sales team to effectively enable your sales reps to like perform at their best, any sort of things that stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's so many angles that you can go in, but I think some of the main ones that we tend to focus on are, well, what is it the buyers are saying, right? More and more you're hearing about this, being cognizant of the buyer's journey, about how buyers, less and less want to talk to
Yeah.
salespeople.
Buyer enablement.
Yeah, and they're coming, very prepared. And so the one thing that I really look at is, what are we doing to help the sales folks? I know as a sales enablement person, we have to support. We're there. The sales team is our customer, right? Is my customer, and how are we supporting them to succeed? And in order to do that, we have to align with the or what is the buyer's journey, and we have to align internally with marketing at the same time. And so I think that's first and foremost. So how do we do that? And I think in aligning with the buyer's journey, I think it means really coming prepared and understanding that, versus showing up with wanting to sell, is how do we show up and help them buy,
Mm.
especially in a complex sale where there's a number of stakeholders involved. How do we help them to buy? How do we educate them? But before we even do that, we have to show up and show them that we've done our research and provide insights, so they understand that we understand their business to a certain degree, and that we're really here to, with a sincere approach, to help them to succeed. And if it's not a fit, it's okay if it's not a
Mm.
fit. We have to also communicate to them that it's okay if it's not going to work, because if it doesn't work for the client, it's not going to work for you, and then that's going to affect one of your KPIs, which is the churn rate, right? And so anyway, maybe a bit too much detail there, but that's really some of the things that we look at as far as how do they come prepared and aligned with the buyers and the way they like to buy, and also with what marketing is providing us, so that we're all singing to the same sheet of music.
I love that. It reminds me of the way that I used to do these sales trainings back when I was in the Bay Area years ago. And one of the things I used to highlight also was, hey, it's not about your sales process. Get that out of your head. Your sales process, if it's created in a silo by itself, and you look at it as something that's like running the show, you're in deep doo doo. You should really be focused on what is the buyer, right, indicating, what's their buying process, right? Like, where are they at in their process, right?
Right.
Like, yes, you can, in my opinion, influence that, certainly, but if you're not diving into that, right, then you get a lot of like really like blown opportunities, number one. And I think one of the things I used to experience a lot before I started to embrace this concept was, oh, I thought someone was in a sales process with me, and they actually weren't, because they weren't in a buying process, right? And even if y- I did a good job of informing them on the need for it,
Yeah.
right? Like, if they weren't there yet, if I wasn't able to get them into that buying motion, then really like not accurately forecasting, right? Or, my pipeline, right? And so this is where I think we get stuck a lot, right? Where, as
Mhm.
salespeople and as sales leaders, when we're trying to figure this thing out, and I think there's many variables, of course, but one of the ones is like thinking that your sales process is what's actually determining the opportunity stage, right? Or the probability of closing, as opposed to like where they're at, right? So I think it ends up being one-sided, right? And I think it speaks to you,
Sure.
what you're saying is like, dive into the buyer piece.
Yeah, diving the buyer piece, and it's okay. Obviously, you have to have a decent sales process. Your sales playbook has to be incorporate all of what we're talking about, of course. And so that's some of the things that I'm doing is helping. What is your sales playbook? What um, assets are we sharing at certain stages of that process with the buyer? Assets meaning whatever websites, PDFs, videos, etc. And what does the conversational intelligence look like? So I should tell you that even though sales enablement incorporates many things, one of the areas I really specialize and focus in on is conversational intelligence around the sales presentation or sales demo. People have asked me, they've sent me recordings, and I've analyzed them. I use a method called the Resonate method. It's
Mm.
a method I came up with, which incorporates elements of challenger, insight selling, and spin selling. So it's my own methodology. I didn't reinvent the whole thing. It's just or I didn't invent the whole thing. I reinvented certain aspects of it, put it together into like a 5-step process, which I think when somebody sees it, it's going to be pretty straightforward. But then I listen to the call recordings, and I provide feedback specifically on that piece. So that one conversational intelligence piece on the sales presentation is part of your overall sales playbook. Obviously, in a complex sale, there's a lot of motions, there's a lot of follow-ups and stakeholders to engage with, right? I tend to focus more or advise folks to focus more on mid-market companies. So it's still a complex sale, but it just happens quicker, right? So they make decisions, I think on average it's 85 days. Okay, great, it's a quarter. So then it becomes easier to project your quarterly numbers. And so that when you show up at your QBRs, at least you had a better chance of hitting certain numbers for the quarter. And so a lot of the mix, of course, comes from mid markets. It's nice to have some enterprises in there if you're able to call on those as. But of course, you're talking 6 to 12 months closing cycle, and that will then obviously potentially blow your quota out of the park. And so that's just some thoughts around sales playbook, and what I'm focusing on specifically. It tends to be more on how do we do this tango between let's for example, if a sales rep is with an SE, a solution engineer, or an SA, a solution architect, How do we do the tango together in presenting, so we show up as a unified front, with a client? We're aligned. We don't disagree on any points internally. We show up as one, and we do the dance very well. So that's part of the work that I do around that enablement piece.
Mm. Speaking of enablement and the role that technology plays, what is your take on that? Like, how much of it is technology? How much of it is includes other stuff? And any sort of emerging trends or tools that you believe are transforming this whole enablement landscape?
Oh, well, yeah, there's tons of tools, right? And of course, AI is all the rage. We already know this, that, we're using this for various aspects. One, I think, the main one is, what AI tools are salespeople leveraging so that they can be more efficient and effective, both. It's not easy to do both, but both in their work. So messaging, coming up with responses, coming up with emails. We see AI helping in all those areas. Um, we have platforms like Asset Mule, which I've been playing with myself, which is another simplified version, because I've implemented some other CMSs like Seismics, and I've done some other platforms, sales enablement platforms like MindTickle that I've implemented, and some other LMSs that I've done. And so, Asset Mule as one technology piece is like a simplified Seismic, I think, or a High Spot, where it's a CMS, but people you'll know when they've read your presentation, which is in the link, versus sending them a PDF, right? So it's a comprehensive piece. So that's one tool that one can use. Again, it incorporates AI in building it. So the whole point is that AI is there to help us build content and to make some of the responses more relevant, because some of those bots will go out and capture information from the internet to determine, okay, what's relevant to this person. Question is, how are we incorporating that in our messaging? So that's one aspect. The second piece that I'm pretty excited about, that I'm actually working on right now, I just got off the call, is a role playing platform. And you've seen some of the other ones out there in terms of having the salespeople role play, because nobody enjoys role playing. It becomes a lot harder with your peers, and it becomes more expensive to do, certainly to bring people together to do role playing. Yes, it's effective, and of course we can do it online now. But what does a salesperson do if they just don't really want to have anybody else? They just want to practice on their own based on what they're about to do with an important client. And so I'm working on incorporating a new platform into my offering that it will enable a salesperson to do some role playing. Also upload a previous recording of a conversation, and then determine aspects of what went well, what could be done differently next time, based on various models, whether it's BANT, or if it's MEDDIC, or spin selling, or Challenger, or even the Resonate method that I talked about, that I developed. So I'm incorporating all of that so somebody can see. If you want to see what's the analysis on all those models, you can have your call analyzed on all those models. And so you can figure out ways to improve on your conversation for a better outcome. That's the reason why we're doing all this, is to help the salesperson get a better outcome.
Awesome. Question about alignment. If you think about the approach that you take to better align sales and marketing efforts, specifically around sales enablement, anything that you would recommend that these organizations do? I mean, it's a topic that comes up all the time, and it's just like, it doesn't seem to get any better, So I mean, you can kind of sense some of my frustration, just given my experiences with this in the past. But any advice you have for folks around, again, you're really optimizing alignment and finally trying to get it right as much as possible?
Yeah, and it comes down to one word: communication. I know it seems painfully obvious, but if it isn't done, it's not going to happen. right? And so there has to be that regular cadence of communicating with sales enablement that's responsible for training the sales team and the sales team consuming the information, because marketing is creating that and sales enablement is creating some of that. So there has to be communication between those two departments on a regular basis. I'm talking like, once or twice a week, we get together and we determine, okay, what's the latest and greatest. Marketing does work for branding for the company. Okay, that's understood. But they also do some work because, as we've seen in some companies, the sales team has to use marketing approved content and slides or whatever it is in their presentations. So that's why that alignment of communication on a regular cadence is very important to begin with. There's just no shortcuts around that. So start with that, between that cooperation and collaboration through a regular communication between the two departments to ensure that we're all on the same page, and that what the sales team, the feedback that we're getting from the field, is something that the marketing folks are also aware of, so that they can adjust what they're saying, versus handing the team, here's a set of, here's your presentation, this is approved, go run with it. Well, you can only do that so much, right? Because that doesn't garner respect from the sales team. And at the same time, it may not be that realistic because we haven't incorporated feedback from the field. So that's why I say communication is really important on a regular basis between sales enablement folks and somebody in marketing.
Do you have any recommendations on metrics or KPIs that sales enablement leaders can put together to track effectiveness that CEOs would be really able to dive into and help determine whether they should invest more or not, right? Like, and so really from that perspective of the executive leadership.
Yeah, there's many ways of tracking it, right? So there's a model that's very common that's already been out there. It's called the Kirkpatrick, right? The levels. There's basically the four levels, and so Kirkpatrick model is one way to present it to the leadership team. And it's all about, what was the reaction at level one. It's like, what's the reaction of the team? What is the sales team? What's the feedback that we've gotten from the sales team? So that's one level of metric, right? And that's through an assessment or what have you. The second piece, it's the learning. And what is it that we wanted the participants to, obviously, what skills, knowledge, attitudes were we trying to adjust in that? And, how did the learning go? Again, we're getting feedback on that from the participants, and we're also getting feedback from that learning piece from the managers of the sales team. The third level is on the behavior, on any adjustments. That comes more from the manager and seeing, okay, what are the results, right? Because behavior is a leading indicator that is driving a result, which then becomes a lagging indicator. It's too late, but you know what happened, but it's too late to then you don't want to improve on the lagging indicator. Well, you do, but how do you do that? You got to go back to the behavior. And so this is feedback that we're getting from the managers and from the sales leadership team as to, okay, how is this behavior impacting the final level 4, which is the results? What's the outcome? What's our ROI from this? Specifically, where have we moved the needle as far as, the typical KPIs that we're looking at as from a results standpoint, right? It's like, what's the training completion rate? What's the is it moving the needle on our win rate, meaning our close ratio, right? What about the sales cycle length? Is this reducing the time it's taking us to close deal? What about the conversions from the leads? How's that looking? And so these are all areas, that we can take a look at as far as the results piece. So those are the 4 levels. Typically, the Kirkpatrick level is what I like to consider and report on.
In terms of frameworks that you've seen over the years? You mentioned challenger sale, and I remember reading spin selling, years ago, and I really like that. Is there anything that really stands out that you really love that's pretty applicable to the current environment today? And for the folks out there, I'm referring to kind of what we've been going through within B2B SaaS specifically. Folks have called it a down market. You've heard us talk a lot about that over the last year on the show. So I'm wondering if there are any like frameworks that tend to really do well with this current kind of dynamic. And I don't know, it feels like maybe we're kind of coming out of it right now, or it's normalizing, or we're really starting to become more resilient as operators in just
Sure.
period.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of noise, right? The noise is increasing tremendously. And you can even see that on response rates. Response on cold calls, it's about 3% to 5%. The response on emails, it's just becoming noisier. Even on LinkedIn, people, everybody's there now, and it's a lot of folks are getting bombarded. I spoke to a client because I'm still actively involved in selling as well, even though I'm an enablement consultant. I'm still selling. And I spoke to a prospect actually who said, you know what, you're the 30th person that's reached out to me, but I took your call. Well, that tells me there's something in the messaging
Mm.
that urged them or provided them with the inspiration to take the call and hop on a call. It's not even that easy to get people on calls, right? And so as far as a framework, I am using my own method, my Resonate method, which is, like I said, I'm incorporating bits from challenger selling, insight selling, spin selling. I'm using some of those. And bottom line is you'll see some numbers here, like 74%, right? Forrester Research did this some years ago where they said that 74% of executives will award a contract to the company that defines the buying vision.
Mm.
And great. Well, how do you define the buying vision? Well, that's usually through showing up with insights. Like I said at the start of our call, is you have to show up with those insights, having done some research. Like basically, you don't show up asking a question. What's going to tell me a little bit about your business? No, you don't. You definitely don't want to show up with that question, right? And so you have to show up with basically stating that I understand that you're doing this and this. I read some news, and this is the latest on that and that. How is that impacting your business at this point right now, given this? So that's more how you massage that question.
Mm.
And then you present the pain. From the understanding is then you have to present the pain, and so that they understand that you understand the pain they're going through. And of course, you're asking more questions around that. And then to really determine if there is a fit, and if there is, which of your solutions are a fit for what pain we're talking about,
Mm.
or the pain that hasn't been mentioned yet. Maybe we need to bring that up. We need to dig deeper. It's always about going deeper and letting them think. So I had one prospect that I spoke with, and the reason they ended up joining me is because I pointed out some things about what was showing up on their website, what was showing up on their LinkedIn profile, things of this nature that were not aligned in their go-to-market messaging. And so when they said to me, I've worked with some other agencies and folks before, but nobody's pointed that out to me. And it might because I'm great? No, it's just I took the time to understand it. And so I wasn't afraid to articulate it either. You have to be transparent and direct. And that's how I am. And so some people like it, some people don't. But it's okay. But at least you've spoken your truth, and people can feel that you're sincere. And when you can communicate that, then obviously they'll see that, oh, this is somebody that I should take seriously, and who's potentially could be a trusted advisor or could help us. So I think those are the things that help move that needle and make a difference.
Incredible. Cesar, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom here on the show. If folks wanted to get in contact with you or learn more about Next Level Consulting, or maybe follow your content, I know you share insights. What are the best channels or URLs to reach you?
LinkedIn is probably the best place to just, because you can also book time with me on LinkedIn. That's the one thing you can do now there at the top. Under your name is book time, so that leads to my calendar. But obviously, if you don't want to book time, you're still welcome to reach out, to me. I put my LinkedIn profile in the chat, and just connect with me, and then we can just. I'm always happy to share insights. I also do some, free strategic sales planning, which I've given some webinars on that, LinkedIn events on it, and I have a recording on it. I can share the recording on the last one we did, just to understand a little bit about another model I work with called the APEE model. And so that's helping with strategic sales planning. So connect with me on LinkedIn. I can share with you some videos I've done in the past around that, or we can just chat.
Awesome. Well, have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You too.